45 minutes, especially when you have such an outstanding speakers. My favorite speakers tonight, we have Ambassador Dr. Natalie Sabanadze, who is a senior research fellow with the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House and serves on the advisory board of the Davis Center's program on Georgian Studies. Prior to that, she was the Cyrus Vance visiting professor in international relations at Mount Holyoke College and served as head of the Georgian mission to the European Union and ambassador plenipotentiary to Belgium and Luxembourg. We had the fortune to be the colleagues on the same team and the same board, pushing forward Georgia's EU integration. In 2005-2013, she held several senior positions with the OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities in The Hague, including head of the Central and South East Europe section and head of the Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia section. So we have tonight Natalie Sabanadze and my great friend and favorite speaker on Russia, Ukraine, on the global affairs. It's Nicolas Tenzer from Paris. He's a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Nicolas is also the chairman of the Center for Studies and Research on Political Decisions, CEPA. Nicolas is currently a guest professor at the Paris School of International Affairs. His interests, as I said, and writings are heavily focused on political risk analysis, European issues, Russia and Ukraine, disinformation warfare, the Middle East, U.S. foreign policy, human rights, and corruption. Before we started recording the webinar, I offered my distinguished speakers and guests to rush around the world, and to discuss where is happening what and how we are entering in the 2026. So no results from Miami talks, no agreement on the Russian assets, frozen Russian assets, though there was the decision on giving the 90 billion euros to Ukraine as a grant. So Putin insists that they have occupied Kupiansk, one of the areas in Ukraine, but the reality shows that the military experts are showing that it's absolutely totally different picture now in Kupiansk. And along the front, it's not easy, it's difficult, but it's not moving anywhere dramatically. So maybe this is the $1 million question, but do you expect that next year, early next year, or any time next year, there could be a peace agreement? Ukraine wants, Zelensky wants to have the peace agreement and is playing a positive part in the negotiations. But is really Russia willing to, and Putin willing to end the war? Let's start with this discussion and with this question, discussing, and then the role of the United States, and then move on along the alliance and U.S. China, Europe-China issues. Natalie, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alex, and it's a real pleasure to be with you. Rondelli Foundation is very dear to my heart because it carries the name of my dearest professor, and I even have a few pictures of him on the bookshelf. So really delighted and to share this panel with Nicolas. Well, you started out with the question of the year, which is going to carry us into the next year. So I will answer it this way. I think we are edging towards some kind of an agreement. I mean, one thing that President Trump did is he came with the kind of a new energy, brought diplomacy back into picture, and is trying to negotiate an end to the war. What is fundamental, however, is what kind of an end are we talking about? And I think that whatever agreement comes out, and I will say whether I believe it will happen next year or not, but what is essential is that at least two conditions are being met. One, that Ukraine has guaranteed security, sovereignty as independent state, and viability as independent state. And here, essential part, of course, and which is why Ukraine is insisting on this, is that there should be some kind of trusted guarantee that there will be non-resumption of the war. Because if Russia agrees to something, gives a little credit to President Putin, and uses it to regroup, reconstitute its forces, and then come back with a renewed power, this is, of course, is going to be the most disastrous outcome of this war for Ukraine. They want to avoid it by all means. Another precondition of this outcome should be that there is no, that we can reasonably think that the new war in Europe is not going to happen in the near future, which means that European security will be guaranteed too. Now, that is also very difficult, and that requires effective deterrence against conventional threat that Russia is going to pose and already poses. And we have to remember that it's building 1.5 million people, you know, the military, which will consist around 1.5 million soldiers, new Soviet style. It would have combat trained and experienced military, also exposure to the latest Western defense equipment. So it will be a formidable menace if it were to come back. So deterrence against conventional Russian threat, but even more importantly, and this is where the biggest gap is, deterrence against hybrid threats. And that's something we're not doing enough, and it is very difficult to do, and we need to learn how to deter it. Now, the reason why this is important is because, and that kind of gets closer to your question, I do believe that for Putin, this is a multi-stage war. Even if hostilities cease next year, even if there is some kind of an agreement, I don't know, for whatever reason, and we can discuss reasons that might lead him to this decision, that does not mean that the war will be over. The war, in the broader sense, I believe, will continue until Putin reaches his objectives. He lost a lot with this war. He lost a lot and he gained very little. Now, more importantly, I think he lost on things that actually matter to him, which is power projection globally, influence, economic dependence, energy dependence of Europe, and the influence particularly in the West. He gained a little bit of Ukrainian territory. Now, we all know that Russia does not need territory, even though he can say that this is important and it's part of the kind of the Russian land. This war is not about territory. This war is about much bigger kind of reordering of the globe. So I do believe he's further from his objectives than, for example, he was in 21 or 19, when there was no European expansion on the agenda, when NATO was smaller, there was no talk about Ukraine or Georgia ever joining. He had his forces supporting Assad. He had entire Europe basically dependent on Russian energy, and so on and so forth. You know, he was much stronger in the South Caucasus, basically uncontested influence here, all over near abroad. Most of these things are eroded. And what he gained, well, okay, he has Crimea, he has clearly gained some parts of Ukraine, but he still does not control entire Black Sea coast. And I think that is something very important for him. So the picture is not great. So he will have to continue. And most importantly, what he wants is, and I mentioned the viability of Ukraine, he wants to destroy Ukraine as an independent, viable state. So in his multi-staged process, he will try to destabilize Ukraine by other, perhaps non-conventional hybrid softer means, through why do you think he wants this Russian language constantly, the Orthodox Church, support of the Russians there. So he'll try to use it. This is the playbook that we know, right? There will be other means, maybe even have the elections is important, and maybe even have the kind of Georgia scenario in Ukraine where you have political party in power that is going to say, we are bitter about the situation, the West has betrayed us, we ourselves going to turn against the West. So the process, in my view, can continue, and I think this is important to keep in mind when we talk about ending this war, that the war should end in all its stages and not just ceasing hostilities. And this, I don't think, is going to happen in 26.
As it was expected, in fact. But let us touch upon the issues related, also the problematic issues also, Nicolas. I will come back to you, Natalie, with regard to Russia's war against Europe after the war ends or not ends with Ukraine. But Nicolas, we are hearing that the issues of the territories, the issue of the number of the Ukrainian troops, Ukraine's integration in NATO, and this, as Natalie mentioned, the language issue and the religion issue, and the frozen Russian assets reparation to Ukraine. Is there any chance that these negotiations will be successful to overcome all of these problems? Leave alone all others. Let's talk about the territorial issues.
Well, thank you very much. Well, for me, it will be very difficult to bring any kind of contradictions to what Natalie just said, because I think that she expressed perfectly and better than I could have done, exactly what I am thinking. But maybe to put it another way, I think that, first of all, there will be actually no peace agreement in the year to come. And I will say, fortunately so, because I think the worst thing that could happen would be a peace agreement. Because if there is a kind of peace agreement manufactured by Russia and the US, which is right now completely aligned with Moscow's demands, it will be certainly a major threat not only to Ukraine, but a threat to the whole Europe. And I think that to put in the same phrase Russia and peace, for the reasons that were perfectly expressed by Natalie, is just a contradiction. There could be no peace with Russia, and there could be no true negotiations or even discussion or dialogue with Russia as it is right now. We perfectly know what are the intentions of Putin's Russia. To seize the territory or to have a full grip on Ukraine with a kind of puppet president, using, the tools that you were mentioning, language, so-called Orthodox Church, just to impose its full control, and to continue to torture, to murder the citizens, and to deport the Ukrainian children. Just imagine that we have a kind of peace agreement. Of course, we know that President Zelensky is saying, okay, I would like to have peace, and I think he's right to say that, because he doesn't want to alienate the US right now, because Ukraine needs certainly the military intelligence, and still the US is providing this military intelligence, which is absolutely vital, just to have the alert on the missiles departing from Russian territory on the Ukrainian civilians. So he tried to play the game, saying, okay, I want peace. And certainly I think he wants peace. But if we have, the peace right now in the conditions imposed by Russia and Vitkov, Kushner, and other Russian allies, what would it mean? First of all, it would mean that part of the Ukrainian territory will remain under Russian control. And we perfectly know what happened in those territories. Each day we have torture, because in each village that Russia conquers, you have new torture chambers. It will mean summary executions, executions of prisoners of war. It will be mass rapes of Ukrainian women and sometimes men as well. It will be the deportation of children, and I can remind of the fact that the deportations of children and Russifications of Ukrainian children is a crime of genocide according to the conventions of December 9th, 1948. And we know, and I think that Alexandra Matvichuk is raising the alarm on that many times, and she's right to do so. We now have in Ukraine 1.6 million children or toddlers that are being enrolled progressively in the Russian army, just as cannon fodder, just to be used after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I don't know, against their brothers and sisters in Ukraine and against Europe. So it will be not only in terms of, I will say, of humanity, because I think human rights matters, humanity matters, and we have to punish the war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide committed by Russia, of course, but also in terms of security. That will be a major threat to Ukraine, but also to the whole Europe. That's why I think it's just impossible to give in, those territories. And I think that's a very important point, which is not often highlighted by the head of state of the government, which is the threat that it poses. Just imagine that we have a kind of security guarantees, that we have some European countries' troops in Ukraine. We could have the French, we could have the Germans, we could have the Brits, we could have some other troops. With just Russia reinforcing its grips on the border of, let's say, free Ukraine, it will be a true danger for those troops. Much more dangerous than right now just to oppose Russia's invasion. That's why I was one of the rare voices in Europe, I know, saying as early as February 24th, 2022, that we have to take action in Ukraine. And I think it would have been less risky, and it's still less risky, than to have a kind of faked peace with those troops stationing, Russian troops stationing, in Ukraine or in the borders of Ukraine. I think that's my first point. The second point is, just imagine, and I think that the true intentions of Trump's and cronies, Jill Vance, Kushner, Vitkov, and others, the Russian economy right now is just plummeting. I am not saying that, of course, Russia will be in a kind of full bankruptcy in the months to come, because certainly there is a kind of resilience of Russian economy for many reasons. We have the self-consumptions in the provinces, etc., etc. But still, the Russian economy is in a very bad shape. And just imagine that we lift the sanctions against Russia. And just imagine that there is new deals between the U.S. and Russia. And just imagine that basically the US and the Europeans turned a blind eye on the circumvention of sanctions. Russian army and Russian economy will be strengthened by that. So it will pose a major threat. And I think that the true intention of Trump is in a way to save Russia from bankruptcy. And we must not allow that. Because we need this kind of bankruptcy. And I will say even that the Russian people would need this kind of bankruptcy. That's my second point. The third point is, just imagine that we have a kind of sham peace deal right now. what will be the fate of the other countries either invaded by Russia or de facto invaded by Russia or under Russian grip, namely Belarus, Georgia, and it could be also a threat for Moldova from some African countries. And I think that will be very dangerous, because then I think the grip of Russia on those countries would be a kind of fait accompli. And that's also something that we cannot accept, we must not accept, because that will be a kind of geopolitical risk for Europe. And I think that Europe as such will then lose its very legitimacy. Mm-hmm. Maybe I will stop here. Of course, we will have many other things to add, but I think that we must have this kind of global picture, or maybe just one point. Right now, we have, I think, one hope. One hope is relies on Europe and on Europe's allies, namely Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Taiwan, South Korea, I mentioned New Zealand, maybe some African country as well, maybe some Latin American countries. Because we have right now a conjunctions of three major powers, namely Russia, which is not a major power because I think that's basically it's doomed to fail, but China, plus right now the US, let's be very blunt on that, plus Iran, plus North Korea. And the true issue is that we cannot allow that this new alliance receive a new strength and become something more substantial. Because the very raison d'être of Europe to fight, to exist, their principles and values will be jeopardized, I think deadly, by this new kind of alliance.
Let me dwell on the issue of Europe you have mentioned, and Natalie also has discussed the issue of Europe. First, but before that, I think if I understood correctly, the U.S. China, Russia, Iran alliance you mentioned, it's emerging. With all due respect, dear Nicolas, I think it's less probable, in my view, that United States, whoever is in its presidency, will become an ally of China, Russia, or Iran, even Iran, against Europe or against Ukraine. But now get back to European issue. So. We all count on Europe. We all want to have a geostrategic, geopolitical player, European Union. When it comes to the statements are always very strong and very important discussions, meetings, summits. But when it comes to the final decision making, so we must admit that Europe is still lagging behind taking the appropriate decisions with regard to Ukraine. They provide enormous assistance bilaterally and in different terms, but there was no decision on the Russian frozen assets. First, second, Europe cannot guarantee the Ukraine's security without United States. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there are much more talks almost on the daily basis that next target of Putin, next target of Russia could be one or two NATO member states or EU member states. I mean, let's say openly, it could be the Baltic countries. Do you consider and do you believe that first, Russia is really planning the further attacking the democratic world and the NATO and EU member states? And having in mind what you have said, that the Russian economy is plummeting. I fully agree in your assessment that it would be good even for Russians themselves that its economy would collapse. But it's too early to talk about the bankruptcy and collapse. Is it doable? Is it realistic that Russia would and could attack NATO member countries, not ending the war with Ukraine, or even after the ending of war with Ukraine? Natalie, what do you think?
Alex, I think Russia is already attacking Europe and NATO and EU member states. Russia openly says that the West is waging the war against us. In fact, it is Russia that is waging the war. As I said, it's not the war against Ukraine only. And Putin has said over and over again, the objectives of the war are much bigger. Attack needs definition. Now, whether Russia is going to go and attack NATO member state, NATO ally by conventional means right now, I don't know. That requires motive. That requires a clear intent and capacity. Right now, maybe not, because the NATO deterrence holds. But at the same time, and here I agree with Nicolas, with Trump, that deterrence has been weakened significantly. Russia's intent has always been to destroy NATO. Its worry, I would say, is not NATO's expansion, despite what it says. It's NATO's existence. And it has always wanted to test that Article 5. And the Article 5 is almost like a myth. You know, you have to believe in it for it to work. And with latest statements, less and less people believe it. So if you have shaken belief that the US is there as a guarantee and the main pillar of the NATO, it will be very tempting for Putin to try it, especially if he feels that he's not getting enough out of this adventure in Ukraine. Now, at what point, which sequence, whether he's going to go for ceasefire first and then do it, or do it simultaneously, we don't know. There's also domestic factors at play, how strong he feels. At the moment, he feels quite strong, but you don't know in this kind of regime at what point you're gonna lose that total control that you have, which is at this point there. I also have to agree with Nicolas that at the moment, the United States is not necessarily against Russia and China. The three of them are not necessarily open adversaries. The one that the Europe today is under threat from Russia, but its biggest threat, I would say, is not Russian, because I think they can get their act together with the Russian threat. The biggest threat to viability of Europe and European Union is withdrawal of the US support, defined broadly. So the latest national security strategy, you can interpret it in many different ways, but President Trump shares, in my view, fundamental kind of the global vision of the world with Putin and perhaps even Xi. And that is, yes, the big guys have the right and the might to rule this world, and others follow. So I think, and also Rubio has said it himself, that the unipolar moment was an exception. It was an anomaly. We are moving to different poles, and different poles is the kind of Yalta moment of the world. The post-Cold War era is over, and now we're moving to something else. But we are in the Gramscian moment, when one world is collapsing and the new one is not yet born and all the demons are coming out. This is where we are now. So it's difficult to say who's going to be the victim, who's going to be the winner here. But Europe is I believe, under serious security risks from multiple sides, including withdrawal of US support, the real Russian, both conventional and hybrid threat, and economic dependence on China, because Europe cannot really afford these kind of multiple confrontation on multiple fronts. But China, let's be honest, is the main enabler of Russia's war effort. So the things, the connections are very ominous the way they look at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Nicolas, you again agree with Natalie?
Well, yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Again, maybe I will just say two things about that. The first thing, you had a remark on Europe capability to fight against Russia. Just remember one figure. If we consider the defense spending of the European countries, it's 3 times more than Russia's defense spending. If we had the UK, which is part of Europe, not of the EU, plus Norway, plus the small Iceland, etc., but we have 3.5 the military spending of Russia. And if you see, the plan that we have right now, especially in Germany, because Germany intends to put the defense spending, and that's a major European country in terms of budget, in terms of economy, to 3.5% of the GDP in 2029, which is the plan. You see that we have, the means to defeat Russia. Of course, we know we have some lacks in some categories of materials, in terms of some kinds of ammunition, in terms of howitzers, tanks maybe as well, etc. But still, we have the capabilities. Europe is not weak. Maybe it lacks the willingness to do something, but it's not weak. If we consider also, the fighter jets that we have in France, in Sweden, in the UK, in Germany, in the Netherlands, etc., we have the capability to strike in depths of the Russian territory. So we do not need the US. We still think that we need the US in terms of military intelligence, which is partly true. But in fact, in 5 years to come, we can get rid of the US military power. Even in terms of nuclear capabilities. Of course, we can say that the UK plus France has less, of course, warheads than Russia. But only France warheads could destroy Russia. That's fact. So we have this deterrence. The question is, do we have the will to use it? The second point is about what Natalie rightly said. That's a threat about the credibility and the legitimacy of NATO. Just imagine that in the years to come, Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania is attacked by Russia with conventional means. Do you think, honestly, that the US will take action? I fear to bet. But I think that the answer is very clear. No, they won't. And I would add that even if this has occurred during Joe Biden's mandate, I am absolutely not certain that Joe Biden would have decided to send troops to protect Estonia. But with Trump, no way. He won't do. He won't take action. And probably the same for Taiwan. So I think that basically you see that the burden relies basically on Europe. Coming then maybe just to end and to make some follow-up remark on what Natalie rightly said just in the before. We are already at war with Russia. Just consider all the assassination attempts that were basically triggered by Russia on European soil. You remember last year in July, there was an assassination attempt against the CEO of Rheinmetall in Germany.
Yeah, sure.
Not even mentioning, of course, the Skripal affair and some other things. You remember that you had some parcels that were supposed to explode during a flight. Finally, they exploded, in some depots, fortunately, and they didn't kill anyone. And it's perfectly true that Russia could use not only the GRU agents, but also the mafia groups or some Islamic cells to commit terrorist attack in Europe. You remember as well the arsons that we have in Poland and some other countries. You remember that also in France there was something very suspicious that happened, in Roissy just before the Olympic Games last year. So basically everything of this kind could increase. And when one speaks of hybrid threats, never forget that these hybrid threats could be lethal and basically kill many and many people. Even the cyber attack, just imagine that we have cyber attack on railway signals, on road signals. It could create accidents and kill people. Same for the hospitals. Many hospitals in France were the target of cyber attacks, and some, of course, physicians had to interrupt some surgical operations because of those attacks. It could be deadly as well. So we are already at war. But if we have a kind of fake peace agreement with Russia, I am absolutely certain that those kinds of attacks on European soil will dramatically increase. If Russia is defeated in Ukraine, and I think it should be, then probably we could have, at least for some years, some respite.
Mm-hmm. You absolutely rightly underlined the word willingness. You have Europe has the capabilities. Yes, you are right. But when it comes to the willingness, when you mentioned that we are at war with Russia already, yes, we are at war with Russia already. But I think when something is missing in the Ukrainian front line, the air defense systems, the long-range missiles, rockets for the Ukrainians, then the questions are arised. That where is all this assistance? I do really appreciate what Germany, UK, France, Norway, Netherlands are doing for Ukraine, but it's still not enough for Ukraine. So I would ask you, and then move to the China issue, but I would ask you if, God forbid, but if Russia attacks any of the Baltic countries, would the European countries go in war with Russia?
You're asking Nicolas or me?
Both of you, but Nicolas has, you touched upon both. You touched upon this Article 5 issue. All the time it was the favorite, all for one, one for all, the Article 5. But now when it comes to the real discussion, now the details are popping up. That it's not the case that everyone will move in with the troops and the arms and etc. etc. So, and okay, you are right to doubt that under Trump, U.S. may not be involved in protecting Baltic countries. But would European countries do their job in defending the Baltic countries? Could you bet on that, Nicolas?
Yes, I think that the former Minister of Armed Forces of France, who is now the Prime Minister of France, Sébastien Lecornu, was asked some months ago by a journalist about that, and he said definitely yes, because we do not have only the Article 5 of NATO, we have also the Article 47.2, of European Union Treaty, that also impose, solidarity if one of the European countries is attacked as well. Of course, we could have, a lot of discussions about, even Article 5. I mean, Article 5 is not mandatory. We need the unanimity of the Council of the North Atlantic Treaty, so the head of state of the government, 32, just to accept that one country triggers Article 5. And then, in terms of military response, not all the countries are compliant to take action. Remember, there was only one time where the Article 5 has been triggered, which was, after the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. Yes. And of course, the Council, accepted, of course, the U.S. demand, but not all the NATO countries sent troops to Afghanistan at that time. So, I mean, of course, but I think that I think we can count on Germany, France, but also the UK, not a member of the EU, plus some others, certainly to protect Estonia. But there is a but. What will happen in France? Sorry, that's my country. In 2027, if the far right wins. What will happen? I think there is less probability if the FD in Germany wins. What if a Farage party wins in the UK, etc., etc.? And we have those political uncertainties as well. Yeah, and then I will follow up on Ukraine just after.
Sure.
If I can just add, I agree again with Nicolas. I think the point here to make is it's not because, just simply, Trump is transactional and Europeans are value driven. I mean, the attack on Baltic states is a direct attack on European security. Americans can still afford and say, okay, transatlantic unity is no longer that important. Maybe I'm withdrawing with NATO and so on. But for Europeans, it is absolutely essential. So I do believe that even if there is, and we have seen that in action now, even if there is no unity within European member states and the kind of European pillar of the NATO, there will be some kind of a unilateral arrangement, because we've seen many of these sort of unilateral responses of those who are willing and capable to come to defense of one of the three or all Baltic states, because it is essential for the security of France or even Britain, even if it is an island. But of course, the question is who runs these countries, and that is Russia's biggest asset. If Russia's playing a long-term game, which it is, and it has been for years supporting this kind of anti-systemic extreme parties, whether right or left, to destabilize and kind of blow up Europe from within, which is now the main enemy for Russia, which is also interesting. The center of animosity coming from Russia has moved from Washington to Europe. That, of course, will change everything depending who is, who runs European countries.
Yes, that's very true. So we touched upon and we mentioned several times China. First, is it correct to say that China is enjoying current status of the global affairs and enjoying Russia's prolonged war in Ukraine, first? And second, under which what conditions would China be involved in ending the war in Ukraine? Let's agree that China has the leverages in its hand, to pressure Russia to end the war, but it seems like that it doesn't want to use these leverages. Why? Is it for making the So multipolar world. I mean, the U.S. China with the on tops of the polls. Is this for the China becoming in the nearest future the only superpower or number one superpower?
Just to answer Russia shortly, sorry. First thing, Xi Jinping China is not Hu Jintao's or Jiang Zemin China. It's completely a different kind of China. I think it's a China which is ideology driven, which is something completely different. I remember many scholars were used during talk shows or forum, etc., to say, well, China want to change the world on its own advantage, but not to rewrite basically fundamentally the rules of the game. Mm-hmm. No, it's completely different. There is a true willingness of China to destroy the very principle post-World War II order, legal order, was based upon. And I think that's completely different. In a way, of course, there is only a kind of contempt, personal contempt from Xi Jinping to Putin, certainly for Putin. I think that's obvious, but that's not the point. The point is Russia is doing the job that China is expecting, just to fragment and to unravel the legal world order, just to show to the face of the world that human rights do not matter, that rule of law do not matter, that international law could be rewritten according to the stronger power of the world. Just have a look at what happened, just in May of this year in Hong Kong. China has decided to create a new organization, which is the International Organization for Mediations. You have already 35 members of this organization. Of course, we have Belarus, countries like this, but we have also Serbia, for instance. Not still Hungary, probably it will come. Because of what? Because the International Court of Arbitrations enacted a ruling some years ago against China on the disputes of South China Sea. Mm-hmm. That, of course, China decided not to abide by. And so China said, okay, I am not very satisfied with the rules right now. I will rewrite the rules to give a preeminence to the powerful nations, to the disruptive nations. So that's why, China, very concretely, is helping Russia in its war against Ukraine, providing weapons, providing assistance, allowing the North Koreans to send troops to Russia to fight against the Ukrainians, etc., etc. So no wonder about that.
Okay. So, Natalie?
Well, I have to start by saying that I'm not a China expert, so I will defer to Nicolas on this. But I think it's clear that China benefits from the situation. China enables Russia to be the destructive player because it sees the purpose in it. And the purpose is obviously global. It wants the change of the both legal and geopolitical order. This destruction of legacy multilateralism, I think, is very important. And both are doing it. Russia has been undermining the work of the OSCE, Council of Europe, and the European side, OPCW, etc., constantly for a very long time. Now it's even more pronounced. China was doing it on its right. And we have emergence of alternative multilateral institutions, such as BRICS, such as CSO, etc., that are openly non-Western. For some, maybe not anti-Western, like in India and Brazil, but for Russia and China, these are clearly anti-Western. It's a different kind of order. They want different rules, interpretation of the international legal framework, which is different. So we are moving in that. And this war on Ukraine has been an incredible kind of a trigger of a lot of processes that led within these 4 years. So many things have changed globally, including the weakening of legacy multilateralism, redistribution of power, weakening of transatlantic bond. I mean, we're talking about whether there can exist. I mean, when Nicolas was talking, I was thinking, can there be an institutional political West without the United States? It's a completely different reality where we live now. And China is a beneficiary. And, to be honest, the nightmare scenario for Russia is that you have a new bipolarity between China and the United States. So it's trying its best to kind of carve its position as one of the poles, which is not guaranteed at all. But the China U.S. is. And of course, the question here, if it is the case, if we have this kind of division of the world, where is Europe? Can it emerge as a separate kind of center of power? And it is at the moment, the only political entities, the sort of polity, which is positive and benign in its intent and has certain capabilities. None others are. And it is absolutely essential for all of us, smaller, medium-sized nations, for this center to succeed and to establish itself as a center. Otherwise, there is no taming of predatory instincts of great powers, which, as I said, in this Gramscian world, are really popping their head.
So my final question is still getting back to Ukraine. But no optimistic forecast for Ukraine in 2026. Do you think that there will be no just ending of the war in 2026, and U.S. will not use its tools and leverages on Russia to end the war in Ukraine, and it will last throughout the whole year?
Well, basically, I do not like the categories of pessimism and optimism, because in a way I will say it's a kind of fatalism. What I am just observing each time I come back to Ukraine, and I came back 6 times since the all-out war, waged by Russia on Ukraine, is 2 things. The first thing, and I remember discussions that I had with a very senior person, in Ukraine. It was in July 2023. They said, well, at the end of the day, we perfectly know that we Ukrainians can rely on no one. And we have to build, just to use a phrase quite often used by Macron and others, we have to build our own strategic autonomy. And I always think about, what this person told me. It was a long discussion. Basically, what the Ukrainians are doing right now is exactly this. If you consider, the strikes on Russian infrastructures, energy infrastructures, military fields, weapons, targeted executions of war criminals, etc., etc., the Ukrainians are doing the job. And I think that at the end of the day, it's not a kind of wishful thinking. I think we have all rational reason, realistic reasons to think that they will prevail. I mean, that's basically, I would say, the bright face of the story. Of course, you have a dark face, and this dark face basically, for me, is a kind of shame, and I would say even or guilt. Is the fact, and Alex, you were just reminding us of that we are not providing enough weapons to Ukraine. Basically, the US plus Europe could have, and certainly should have, defeated Russia at least in 2022, at the end of 2022, or even before, or in 2023. I mean the US at that time and European, we could have saved thousands of lives. And basically we didn't want to. And I think that the harsh lesson, and I can say that, the Ukrainian knows this lesson by heart. And President Zelensky, of course, is always saying, thank you. Okay, we are not doing nothing, we European. The US were not doing nothing as well. But behind this polite thank you, I think that they use, and rightly so, resentment against the Europeans for not having done the job for the Ukrainians, but also for their own security. And what I do hope is that you have right now some European leaders who perfectly know that. And I think that Friedrich Merz probably knows that by heart also. I think that Friedrich Merz could be. I am not sure that he will be. I have a lot of course, mixed feelings, etc. But I think that he could be, or probably we can expect he to be a kind of true leaders, being in the forefront of the fight for the support of Ukraine. I am not confident, of course, with the Baltic states, with the Nordic states, etc. I am less confident about the other powers. So I think we can do more, but I think that's basically, we have, this capability, and Ukraine has this capability.
Thank you, Nicolas. Bravo. Natalie?
Well, just in 1 minute, because I think we're running out of time. What Nicolas said about Ukraine, knowing that they can rely only on themselves and need autonomy of action and decision, and ultimately their fate is in their hands, I think is something important for us to remember too, Georgians, because I think we still think that the help is coming from somewhere, but it's not coming. And the resource needs to be found within us to defeat our own internal Russia, so to say. And that just made me think about it. And it's very difficult to be optimistic in this situation, given the pain and the death that we witness for almost 4 years now. But what is clear is that Ukraine and Europe are, that's generalized Europe now, but it's not easily generalizable, are standing together. There is a kind of understanding that the fate is interconnected. And I would not also underestimate Putin's capacity to make a mistake, to make a blunder. He had some very, very generous offers this year. He should have taken them. I think it's a mistake that he didn't, and probably luckily for us. So if at some point also, the patience runs out, the US remains committed, at least in a sense of providing intelligence, critical enablers, and allows Europe to, build its needed capabilities, there could be a turning point. And yes, Russian economy is under strain. And when Putin says that everything is okay, of course, he's bluffing, just as he's bluffing when he's taking various territories, which is not the case. He wants to avoid large-scale mobilization by all means. So things are not easy. So if we reach the tipping point in this calculus that will kind of force him to start thinking of concessions and allowing Ukraine to come out of this in the shape that will allow it to rebuild and actually be a contributor to European security. This is what he wants to stop from happening. He knows that it's not also only about Ukraine, but if Ukraine with its army, with its territory, with its determination is a major asset for Europe. And in that sense, Europe, which he has made into a major enemy, will be a stronger enemy. So it's again a very kind of multi-layered game, and let's hope that Russia is going to be on the losing side.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much for such an outstanding discussion. It was a real joy for me to have you tonight at the discussion on the global affairs. So Ambassador Sabanadze, Mr. Tenzer, thank you very much. Let me congratulate and wish you all the best for the holidays. Wish you peace, prosperity, and security in upcoming 2026, and hope to see you somewhere in this world, in Europe, at the Rondelli Security Conference in next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you, Natalie.